The recent disruptions in the Red Sea and Suez Canal have underscored the vulnerability of existing traditional routes. As maritime choke points become increasingly exposed to geopolitical tensions, diversification of trade corridors and the creation of flexible, multimodal networks have emerged as strategic priorities. Against this backdrop, the India-Middle East-Europe Economic Corridor, first introduced at the 2023 G20 Summit, was envisioned as a multimodal corridor connecting India to Europe through the Middle East, integrating sea and rail routes across the UAE, Saudi Arabia, and Israel's Haifa port before reaching European destinations. However, rising regional instability and logistical concerns surrounding the Haifa link, combined with the high capital requirements of building a new greenfield corridor, have prompted policymakers and investors to rethink the model. The re-evaluation has given rise to a broader vision of an interconnected network of corridors that can ensure flexibility and cost efficiency, rather than relying on a single route. Within this expanded approach, other countries such as Oman and Egypt are emerging as pivotal partners in strengthening regional connectivity and reducing dependence on volatile routes. In particular, IMEC-Egypt has gained momentum as a cost-effective and politically stable alternative. By leveraging Egypt's strategic location and advanced infrastructure, especially its nearly complete high-speed electric rail network linking Alexandria to Safega. This session will discuss all existing and proposed corridors. The discussion will assess trade-offs in cost efficiency, transit time, and geopolitical resilience, while exploring how Mediterranean nations and global partners can harmonize regulatory frameworks and infrastructure investments to establish a sustainable and adaptive connectivity network, linking the global north and south. Under all scenarios, the fact remains that Suez Canal is the shortest and cheapest route for trade.
Hello everyone, we're back. This is the last session before the lunch and lunch sessions, so bear with us. It's a pleasure to have all of you, and we are going to talk about a very, very important topic that is extremely relevant to the previous sessions, because what's happening in the Middle East, what's happening in the world has a lot to do with the concept of connectivity that is emerging. Okay, as you have seen in the video, and actually we have this map which you see in the background. It is looking at all the roads that are being suggested at this point, and we're going to talk about them and talk a lot more. We have with us via Zoom Anita Prakash. Is she on? Yes? مش سامعة لسه? She's going to enter in 5 minutes. Okay, but we're going to start. All right. Now, the idea, there wasn't enough talk about connectivity before. Somehow, the concept of connectivity, previously, it was always about people moving from one place to the other, digital connections, and then suddenly, in the last few years, everyone is talking about routes, corridors, trades, alternative routes to the Suez Canal, to existing traditional routes. It started to take another shape. So I would like to start actually with Excellency Nasser Kamel, okay, to set the floor, set the pace of the discussion. Okay, all those new corridors that we are talking about, what do they mean from a geopolitical and geo-economic perspective, in your opinion?
Thank you. Thank you very much, Dr. Abla Abdulatif, first for inviting me to participate in such a distinguished panel, and to the Egyptian Center for Economic Studies Cairo Forum. And of course, your co-host, Mr. Mohammed Shireen Naggar. As you rightly said, connectivity in all its forms, digital, transport, energy, and what have you, has become the new currency of geopolitics in today's world. When we look at the three major economic powerhouses in the world stage, Europe, the US, and China, and I'm not stating them in order, of course, each has come up with its own vision, although Europe and the US are working in one, but Europe has its own vision, which is global gateway, the EU global gateway, which was actually designed 3 or 4 years ago as a counter-proposal to the China Road Initiative, Road and Belt Initiative. So those through, and then came the US proposal for IMEC, stretching from India all the way to Europe. Each one of those, actually, when you look at the map, and you have maps for each one of them, are actually following the exact same path and hope to achieve the exact same result in connecting, basically, when it comes especially in the China case, the road, the maritime dimension of their initiative is to connect Southeast Asia, China to Southeast Asia, to the Middle East, Africa, and Middle East, Europe. IMEC has exactly the same goals and focusing on the same objectives, and the European initiative is also focusing on the same objective with a focus on governance and democratic values and creating an environment where an environment that is conducive to investment in all the countries that would be part of that corridor. So the competition is quite clear and is quite apparent in the different vision for those corridors. Since our session today is more focused on IMEC, so I will take a couple of minutes to talk about IMEC. As you all know, IMEC was launched by the US administration as a response, actually, to the Chinese initiative. But on top of its objective in terms of transport mainly and other connectivity, digital, and energy, it had a geopolitical twist. That geopolitical twist wanted to integrate Israel within the economic and political landscape of the Middle East. So the corridor unnaturally took a route that will link Saudi Arabia, Jordan, and Israel to the Mediterranean, instead of using the natural corridor that exists, which is Egypt/the Suez Canal. And that was actually a point of weakness, because as much as we have been talking about IMEC for the last few years, and I know that some of the panelists will disagree with me, the project has not yet, did not yet take roots in terms, at least for its Mediterranean dimension. Maybe it did in some other region, but it hasn't. Why? Well, the previous panel was extremely spot on. The conflict in Gaza, the GCC reaction to the conflict in Gaza, and also the GCC reaction to Israel policies in the region has made this particular dimension of that corridor, for me, at least for now, impossible to realize, and has stalled any effort in accelerating any drive towards creating that corridor. Here comes the possibility of recalibrating the whole concept by including Egypt, not because we are in Egypt, but Egypt in terms of its stability, location, and infrastructure network, as not necessarily replacing the other corridor, but as being an important part of the IMEC, which we call today IMEC-E or IMEC-Egypt. I can elaborate unless you want to go and ask other panelists, and then we can come back to that. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. And then Shireen is going to comment on this.
Yes, in just comment to His Excellency's remarks here, it is, yes, very much a geopolitical issue to start off with, but commercially, I think eventually this would have died by itself, even if it was implemented, very simply because you are talking about a lot of variables that IMEC, as it stands or as it stood at the beginning, will not be able to sustain. One being the economy of scale. If you compare it with the Suez Canal, well, how much is the biggest train in the world capable of carrying 1,000 containers? A Suez Canal can handle ships that can carry 26,000 containers. So there is no means of comparison. The other thing is that commercially, it will not stand viable because it does not touch Africa in any way, whereas Egypt is the center of Africa. So between those 2 points alone, there is a lot of debate and there is a lot of deficiency on the existing IMEC only. IMEC-E is much more superior in that respect. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Shireen. I'm actually going to, I'm going to move to Anita. Okay, Anita Prakash on Zoom. And please, first of all, I want you all to give a hand for Anita, and I'll tell you why after you clap for her. Please. Anita's daughter is getting married today. And she was supposed to come, but she couldn't, but she accepted to go via Zoom for our conference, even though this is the wedding, and you see her wear lovely shade of orange. So all my love, Anita, and have a lovely wedding for your daughter. I will not keep you for long. This is why I want to go to you. Now, we are talking about IMEC, and we're talking about IMEC-Egypt, and you are one of the economic architects of this corridor from the Indian point of view. You are doing a lot of studies on its feasibility, what it can achieve, how valid, how the concept needs to be changed, and how to involve other countries to make it more useful and to have development of value chains and so on. So if you can elaborate a little bit on that, please.
Thank you so much, Abla. I hope everybody can hear me. And first of all, congratulations for this very successful Cairo Forum 2. And without much ado, let me straight away come to your point, Abla. As you have very kindly mentioned earlier also about the very detailed policy brief that we have written on this particular theme itself, as to how IMEC's relevance can be increased by including the countries in North Africa, in particular, those countries which are hugely engaged into the GVCs of manufacturing. I'm not talking about digital economy yet. Let us confine ourselves to trade in goods. And in that, our countries in North Africa, Egypt in the front, leading from the front, as well as Turkey. And this is the picture that we are imagining. Our previous panelists have said that IMEC has not necessarily taken off. Indeed, the infrastructure part is lagging behind, but there is no reason to believe that other aspects of IMEC, because from an Indian perspective, or from an Asian perspective, IMEC is very much a multidimensional, multimodal connectivity program in which manufacturing, trade connections, connections between commercial centers, these play a very important part, regardless whether they follow the infrastructure route, the linear infrastructure route, that has been sort of pre-imagined in IMEC when it was being signed. Now, as we also know, Abla, that between the signing and now, a lot of geostrategic changes have happened. We are hoping that the peace accord will, sort of bring some sort of normalcy in the region, and the connectivity, the infrastructure part, will regain some momentum. But in the meanwhile, all the countries engaged in this IMEC program and our leading producers in Africa have to come forward and create a kind of global value chain clusters. Now, why do we talk about clusters is this. All the signing countries, India, UAE, Saudi Arabia, they are all investing very hugely in their own production capacities. We have a Make in India program in India. UAE is deepening its manufacturing and investment programs. Saudi Arabia is diversifying its economy. Now, energy connectivity narrative is very much on track, but the GVC connectivity, how these important production centers, which will also include important economies of Africa, North Africa, precise here, and Turkey. This is what we are trying to imagine. This is not imagination per se. This is a reality. We have proved it by evidence in the policy brief. I will encourage everybody to visit it. But I would like to share my screen just for a moment and see as to host has disabled participant screen sharing. But if this may be sort of allowed just for a moment, I would love to show this. I would love to show this how
Ibrahim,
GVC
can you allow
work.
Anita to share, please? Just for a moment, please. Anita wrote actually a policy brief on the issue, a very powerful one that is actually going to be published by ECS in parallel with the conference the next couple of days.
Yes. Without wasting any further time, if I can, yeah, I've got it now. So here is what I'm trying to show is how the GVCs function. If you follow the lead from Southeast Asia, the production center of the Global Production Center. Now, this is how the BIMP IAGA, the Brunei, Indonesia, Malaysia triangle work, Philippines triangle work. This is the IMT-GT, the Indonesia. And these are the proven way into how countries come together to become huge manufacturing hubs. I am extrapolating the same theory, the learning from Southeast Asia between India and UAE and Saudi Arabia, but more importantly, Saudi Arabia and the northern part of Africa, which includes Egypt, which also includes Morocco, and we also have Turkey. So this is how we foresee. It is not the infrastructure connectivity narrative, but it is the global value chain narrative that has to be brought into IMEC, and to see IMEC move forward, lose its stagnancy, and fulfill the second and more ambitious objective of bringing in North Africa and East Africa, led by Egypt and also led by Turkey, another huge production center in this region, and other willing countries of Mediterranean. This is how we foresee the current and the future of IMEC. One last point I would like to make here, Abla, is that the initial concept of IMEC is linear, but the learning from this Southeast Asia region, where I have worked extensively, and which is a very successful region in terms of both infrastructure connectivity as well as manufacturing powerhouse, So this learning needs to be extrapolated here. All the ground conditions are already present. So IMEC needs to be seen as a spatial program, not as a linear program. And the final word that I want to put here is that Suez Canal, the idea here is that connectivity programs are always complementary to each other. Therefore, Suez and IMEC cannot be exclusionary. They have to complement each other. It's not one or the other. One is not scaling enough. The other has. We need new infrastructure. New conditions of manufacturing require new infrastructure, which basically means that the old and the new have to complement each other. And that is the real challenge and the opportunity before us, both in Asia and in Africa and Europe too. So that's where I will end, Abla. I hope I've been able to bring some sense onto the table here. Let me just stop sharing my screen.
Yes, thank you very much, Anita. That was extremely useful, and the three ideas are very clear. Regardless of the infrastructure itself, okay, the connectivity there is taking place. The initial concept of IMEC is linear, but it should not be that. It should be, you know, a more spatial, okay, and what? There was a third point. Yeah.
Connectivity programs are complementary, always complementary.
Yes, connectivity program. Yes, the Suez Canal. How can I possibly miss the Suez Canal?
Yes.
It has to complement all of these others. Now, this is, you brought an excellent base for the commentary by the rest of the speakers, and then commentary by Shireen at the end. Let me start with Romana. Okay. Romana, when we met actually in one of the events, and there was talk about IMEC, and I was telling her IMEC-Egypt, and then she said, but there's so many other countries in the Mediterranean that should be in the picture, okay? So we agreed that she's gonna talk about that. So do let me know what you think, Romana. Is this working?
Thanks a lot, Abla, and thank you for having me. And before I move on, Anita, congratulations for the wedding for your child. So IMEC means India, Middle East, Europe. Let me take you to Europe, which, of course, amid this great restructuring of the world that we are witnessing, is also facing numerous challenges and numerous changes. And I will talk only briefly about two of them. One is geography, and another is the method of operating. For Europe, Russian aggression on Ukraine basically meant that the whole East-West dimension has been neutralized for quite a long time. And it has discovered the North-South one very much, and I think it's with us to stay. And in that North-South dimension, Mediterranean once again becomes the Central European Sea. Incredibly important, not just for the countries that lay on the shores of the Mediterranean, but also for the strategic depth of Europe. So it's a completely new theater, if you wish, when it comes to the creation of value chains, not just, of course, transport, but the whole system. And I now work on what I believe is probably the most consequential intra-European connectivity initiative, the work on linking Baltic Sea, Black Sea, and Adriatic Sea. Once you look at the map, you understand what we are talking about. It's a very deep penetration of the logic of IMEC, very deep into the European continent. One thing that Anita has mentioned, I think it's super important to recognize, is, I guess you have seen that European pivot to Asia. Europe is really, traveling like mad and going to different places, trying to finish the FTA with India by the end of the year, upgrading econ relations with Indonesia, working on FTA with Philippines. And when you combine this ambition to create an environment where you could move manufacturing or create additional manufacturing hub where you could do localization in that part of the world, plus traditional work, which I think Europe has always had with North Africa and in particular Egypt. This is this basin that Anita has shown on her map. So when we are talking about IMEC, we are talking about a concept of rewiring or recreating a different network or value chains. Which brings me to the second thing, which is a method. And I think one thing that I will never get tired of repeating is Europe really needs to move into the mode of industrial partnerships. Not development assistance, but industrial partnerships. This has to be a relationship between the equals where all sides in that industrial partnership have a benefit. And this, I believe, is the only way. I was listening very carefully to a panel on financing where we would be able to have a credible and attractive proposal for scaling up investment in all of this, which can only come from the private sector. There are a lot of instruments that can help, that can support, but the need is such that it's only the private sector that will be able to cater for this.
Thank you. If we move to Amber now. Amber, if you could tell us where IMEC is right now. What is the status? I had the pleasure of meeting Amber for the first time when she came with Gerard, the personal envoy of President Macron for IMEC, and came to Egypt. What was it, March, April, something like this?
February.
February, okay. All right, and this is when we talked for the first time about beyond IMEC, and there was a lot of interest by France, but she knows what is happening, so do tell us a little bit where we are.
Thank you, and first of all, thank you for this invitation. It's a pleasure to come back to Egypt. As said, IMEC has been designed as a transformative connectivity concept and project for the next decade. A transformative project because it was part of the Abraham Accords. And also it was seen as a concept to deepen the partnership with some BRICS countries, and mainly India. But just to bring everybody on the same page, it is important to come back to the timeline and think that the signature of the MOU happened 3 weeks before 7th of October. So this juncture has also disrupted the whole process of structuring of the initiative. The important point is that IMEC is progressing. It's particularly progressing over the past few months under the coordinated effort of the most active countries which were part of the initial signatories. Just as a reminder, for the signatories, you had 8 countries: India, the US, Team Europe, the European Commission, Italy, Germany, France, and for Gulf, Emirates, and Saudi Arabia. So in last August, you had the first steering committee happening in New Delhi, gathering the signatories, where actually the framework, governance framework of IMEC has been established at 3 levels, a ministerial level, a steering committee at Sherpa or key representative level, and technical working groups, which are actually, we will focus on the different sectorial categories, which are, since you have an energy pillar for energy connectivity, digital connectivity, transport of goods, financing also, which will be explored, and one overarching group which will deal with feasibility studies, which is also a preliminary phase, which is very important to move forward, and the political coordination. So it is important to think that the kickoff of the collective governance just happened a few months ago. The second steering committee happened 3 weeks ago on the sidelines of the Global Gateway Forum. It was chaired by the European Commission. Things are progressing. I would like to build on the different comments because I think IMEC is an evolutive concept. There is the initial terms of reference, and a lot of countries which are on the route are relevant to the concept will be at some point around the table. We can think about Oman, and we can also think about Egypt. I will not mention the different. It is also the same for the Mediterranean with Cyprus, other countries, Malta. And as you mentioned, since the very beginning, the vision of France was that Egypt should be associated to IMEC. As mentioned by Amita, we've seen the different networks as a complementary routes. And IMEC now is evolving with this concept of networks of connectivity to leverage existing hubs. So this is, with my visit today, the third time that the French IMEC Vision mission visited Egypt. We came in February with a special envoy to prepare the vision. During the state visit of the President Macron, the official strategic partnership mentioned that France will support IMEC, Egypt joining IMEC. They will encourage them to explore the different relevant interconnection points because we are talking about the Suez Canal, but other options and ports. Port Said, Port of Alexandria are also part of the picture. And I would like to say that the report that you released with the ORF is very instrumental in building all the data and the different aspects that could be part of different scenarios around IMEC. So it's a positive concept. It will be a platform to develop new networks for connectivity. And this is really the way, the philosophy of IMEC in which we are progressing today.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. This, by the way, this study, we published a study with ORF about IMEC and IMEC-Egypt, and the main author for it was Shireen, who likes to speak more than moderate, and that's why I'm here with him. So I'm moderating, and he's ending up being a speaker. Let me ask His Excellency Francesco Italo a question, and then pass the mic to you. You're always, you are the envoy of the Italian Ministry of Foreign Affairs for IMEC. And I heard you more than once talking about how IMEC is going to link to Africa and everybody together. My question is, do you see IMEC with its linear corridor linking to Africa? Because this doesn't make any sense to me. So I'm going to explain.
Thank you. No, we should really put aside the word corridors. I think the key word is networks, or maybe a network of corridors. So maybe I think that now the previous speakers, I think, repeated often the word networks. So this is especially important, appeared important in the last 2 years, but from the very beginning, it was very clear that it was completely stupid to think IMEC as an alternative to Suez. If you speak with any person in the business, they will tell you that Suez is by far, much more important than any possible transshipment. So what we need is to have redundancy, differentiation, and we need this in a world where you cannot disinvent globalization, but we will have a different kind of globalization. Earlier, there was a discussion about G2, G1. I think we are going toward a G0 world, an apolar world. I mean, it was very pertinent, the word entanglement in a previous discussion. So really, we are going toward the quantistic dimension, not binary. It means that we have to build networks much more, let's say, sophisticated and complicated, not only for goods, but for energy, for digital. The digital dimension is going to be crucial. This is the energy, the fuel of the 21st century. And here comes the question, we need to differentiate, we need to have more and more routes, also because, I mean, we hope, we expect to have to redouble the trade between India and Europe. But absolutely, it's not only India and Europe and Middle East. I love to think IMEC as the acronym of Indo-Mediterranean Economic Connectivity. And Egypt is really the quintessential Indo-Mediterranean country because it's 100% Mediterranean and the Red Sea is part of the Indo-Pacific. The Indo-Pacific is really the engine of the economy in the 21st century. The Mediterranean is very, very small, is 0.8% of the sea waters in the planet, 0.8%. But it has 20% of maritime trade. And this is why Suez is so important. And this is why the Mediterranean is so important, because it's the small ring between the two largest basins of the world, the Indo-Pacific and the Atlantic, and we are in the middle. And so we need to leverage this position, Egypt, our countries in the Mediterranean, the countries of the Indian Ocean, and we have to look forward, the Atlantic and the Pacific Ocean. So that's why Indonesia is so important, and the ASEAN countries. We have to continue on the other sides. And, of course, 3 continents, Africa, Europe, and Asia. And I much prefer to speak about Western Asia instead of Middle East, which is a colonialist concept, where Italy probably is Near East. I mean, it was made in another capital of Europe. So I think that it's really important to think about this connection. And we are starting to work in this, with this approach. For instance, the Global Gateway initiative is the umbrella both for IMEC and for the Mattei Plan, where Italy is focusing, putting the focus on Africa. And Africa should be considered really the continent of future, the continent of hope, instead of having this usual, let's say, attitude of charity toward Africa. Africa is the great opportunity. So let's work together. And speaking about digital, you know, the digital is one of the pillars of IMEC. So it means having connectivity between India and Europe. And the connection is almost finished. So obviously it started, the building started before the conception of IMEC. And it's Blue Raman, the project between Mumbai and Genoa, and then all the Europe and the Mediterranean. So it will pass through Djibouti, so it will not cut the Arabian Peninsula. So it's the demonstration that there is not only one route, it's not only to cut the peninsula. It will pass to Djibouti and go up in the Red Sea. But the new initiative is to have from Djibouti south on Eastern Africa to Tanzania. And this is under Global Gateway and Piano Mattei. And so this means that we can work together and we can really have complementary plans. And I think that we can make a lot together, having Egypt as really a pillar and a center for all the initiatives between all these 3 continents, also because like we said, I mean, this morning, the minister, Al-Wazir, said it's important to consider not only the connectivity in space, but also in time. Our wealth is not only the resources we have, but also our heritage. The museum is so important. So somehow our countries are represent a lot of the past, of which we are, of course, proud. Asia, the Indo-Pacific is the present, but Africa is the future.
Thank you very much. Extremely, extremely useful and extremely telling. Please, you want to proceed, questions or comments as you wish.
Okay. I'd just like to comment on my colleagues here by asking a very straight question. What happened to Europe after World War II? It was total devastation. There was nothing basically standing, not a single building standing, and the same as Japan. And the model they adopted at that time was to build their own industry, and they came up from scratch. Italy being an example, Germany being an example, and Japan being an example. Those countries were devastated during the World War, and they built their own country by building their own industry, and the industry depended very much on their local production and on the local local raw materials. And at the end of the day, they built up an empire which became eventually Europe. Not just Italy, but it's Italy, Germany, France, all over Europe, which became an industrial powerhouse. But then, as time progressed, things became very expensive, and taxation made it very difficult for employment and for labor to be as inexpensive as to compete worldwide. So they started shifting over to places like the Asia Tigers, as you used to call them, like Vietnam, Malaysia, Indonesia, Thailand, using them to manufacture things like garments, like small electronic equipment and so on. And you see a lot from, for example, you go into an Italian fashion shop, you'll find it's made in, T-shirt is made in Malaysia or made in Thailand or things like that, because of the cheap labor. At that time, transport was relatively cheap or relatively inexpensive, and it warranted the idea that the Europeans will shift their industrial base from homeland into remote areas like the Far East. Now the Far East itself has become a bit expensive, and not only that, the Far East has also become too distant, and we have only found, to our distress, and to my distress personally as an Egyptian, that the Suez Canal can be a bit molested by rebels like the Houthis and so on. So interruption has becoming more and more frequent to the traffic in the Suez Canal. The result of that gave us gave the Europeans the idea to move further towards the north, to be closer to their markets. So the only place, and I think the Egyptian government has done it very smart by creating the Suez Canal Economic Zone. Now, the Suez Canal Economic Zone is the replica of the manufacturers in Indonesia, Thailand, and all that, and all those countries which have now become remote, also China for that matter. But if you look at the conclusion that Egyptians are today building up several parks, or not the Egyptians, but the foreign countries are building up several parks. For example, you have the German park, and you have some automotive, some very important brands like Mercedes, like BMW. They are all starting to assemble in Egypt. And they are not just assembling in Egypt for imported components, but they are also locally manufactured components are coming into the picture. Egyptian cotton, with all its fame, is coming back, and in Mahalla there is a very big mill which has been completely rebuilt and is starting to function once again. What I'm trying to say here is that Egypt has groomed itself, has positioned itself in such a way that it can replace the manufacturing bodies in the Far East through the Suez Canal Economic Zone. And of course, this is backed by the Suez Canal and the operation of the Suez Canal. At this moment in time, yes, we have an interruption, but I think this nuisance of a Houthi is not going to last very long, because it's really affecting the entire world. Now, when you look at how Egypt is positioned in that respect, Egypt is only, 3 days from, say, Port Said is 3 days from Genoa, or from Goya Tauro, or from places like that, 3 days steaming maximum. So the distance moving is the transit time of your finished goods, as Italians are very close. French, 4 days. Spanish, 5 days. So you are really, within the Mediterranean basin, you are only within 1 week of all the European markets. That is one thing. The other thing is that you also can service the Eastern European destinations over Turkey, because Turkey is, what, 36 hours away from port side. So if you can just steam across 36 hours, then you are connected to Turkey, and Turkey is connected very nicely to Eastern Europe, and places like the Caucasian states, like Azerbaijan, Uzbekistan, all these places, these are dead countries economically to us and to a lot of Europeans also. They are pretty dead countries. They very much depend on the former communist states, and some of them are still basically under the full umbrella of Russia. So there you will be opening up new markets, not just for the Egyptians, but for the Europeans manufacturing in Egypt. And that, of course, is a very advantageous step for Egypt. Finally, the modus operandi, how this should all work. I think the IMEC needs to imitate the Chinese. And in a sense that the Chinese have built up the One Belt, One Road. And I'll talk about the belt at the moment. And the belt starts from Shanghai, for example, or from Shenzhen, or any of those places. And it goes all the way across Northern Europe, all the way into Hamburg, into Stettin, and even into Ilford in the UK. Now, here you have half a belt. Now, if the Chinese, what they are planning to do at the moment is develop the southern bracket of the belt to create a complete belt, that is, it is obvious that they will be coming through the port of Abu Dhabi and through Pakistan, Gwadar, and they will cross and go into Abu Dhabi. Abu Dhabi will bring it across to Egypt, across the Red Sea, and then they will be setting foot into Africa. Now, they have so far failed in Africa because of distancing and logistics and transport logistics. But if they implement this modus operandi, they will definitely succeed in Africa. And in Africa, you have what, 1.2, 1.3 billion people and 54 countries. So you got a whole world open in front of you.
Thank you. Thank you, Shireen.
They depend on rail entirely, rather than the IMEC model, which I have a lot of remarks about, because the IMEC model depends on lift on, lift off. You lift on the ship, and then you lift off the ship, put on a train, and then you take it back off the ship, and they put on another ship. So the whole thing is more and more expensive. The Chinese have done it very smart, and they have been very successful with the northern bracket, although now, because of the sanctions and because of the problems with Russia, things are being slightly interrupted, but they are still being pioneering there. And
Shireen, I want to ask another.
In a minute.
Yeah.
One final thing we need to define here, that ocean transport is the cheapest modus operandi. However, what we are talking about, rail or surface transport, is for goods that are expensive, that can warrant freight increases. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Shireen. He's quite an expert on shipments. Okay, and the paper that were written jointly with ORF had all the details and a very serious comparison between IMEC-Egypt and IMEC. But I have a question. One round of question again for all of you. We are talking about Egypt has to pay attention, Europe has to pay attention for industrial partnerships. We're talking about platforms. We're talking about everybody getting together. Yet, when you talk to the original people who signed the MOU, even though in meetings they are starting to change the talk, okay, and not talk about a linear corridor anymore, but talk about the network, when it comes to involving other countries, the talk is always, okay, the people who started off with the MOU need to sign first an agreement, and then we consider bringing other people in. So what do you think of that? What do you think is going to happen with IMEC it is a very en vogue concept. What do you think is going to happen? I want to start with His Excellency Nasser Kamel.
Well, let me first start by commending the French President Macron when he spot on understood that politicizing IMEC and making it part of the Abraham Accords when it comes to its northern corridor. I'm not talking because our Indian colleague was talking about the larger picture. We are here in talking about the region, the Med. So when we talk about the Mediterranean dimension of IMEC, it was definitely based on geopolitical consideration and a greater plan for a peace built on the Abraham Accord in that region. The moment we depoliticize, not in a way by excluding Israel, but by including those who are more naturally, by their location, by their infrastructure, by the Suez Canal, obviously. 12% of the world trade is already going through the Suez Canal, and 30% of the world container volume is going through that canal. If you bypass that, you are definitely not doing or making the right decision. So depoliticizing, as someone who belongs to the Mediterranean, I would love to see the two big initiatives, the Chinese one and IMEC, which will converge eventually in Egypt through the Suez Canal, be able at a certain point to work together. I refer to what our Chinese colleague was speaking before, having a pragmatic, pro-business approach to things. I also concur with Shireen's comment that there is also, as much as we need those corridors and those connectivity, and connectivity is not only about shipment, by the way, it's about energy, about digital, about so many, about human, actually. But as much as we need to connect India, China, Southeast Asia to the Middle East and to Europe, and from the Middle East and North Africa especially to Sub-Saharan Africa through Cairo, Cape Town highway, or Cairo, Dakar, or Morocco, Dakar, we also, it's extremely important that we also take into consideration what COVID-19 has led Europe and so many others to consider the importance of nearshoring in terms of not having a value chain depending on thousands and thousands of miles, and trying to bring some of the most important industry for Europe, at least, closer to Europe by relocating to places around the Mediterranean. So using those two dimensions, making the world better connected, and also nearshoring some of the production. And then the third dimension, which is extremely important for Egypt and the Med, is the huge potential of renewable in the Med, especially Egypt and North Africa, that is more than capable, if we have the right interconnection between those two regions, of providing Europe with energy needs and reducing Europe dependency on energy resources, especially from Russia, in view of the Russia-Ukraine war. Thank you very much.
Thank you. We're talking about the larger meaning of connectivity. Anita, I'd like you to comment on this again, the idea that the ones who did the original agreement do not want to have others involved before they actually sign. It is something that's on the table. Right, Amber? It is on the table. No, go ahead, Anita.
Yes, thanks, Abla. Yes, look, the signing was, one has to understand who or which parties were mentoring the signing. Now, for purpose of clarity, let me re-emphasize that IMEC is part of the PGII, which is sort of a program of the G7. So once that clarity is there, then rest of the discussion becomes quite easy. from thereafter, when IMEC meets reality. Now, we all know that IMEC, there are better experts here than me on this issue. The Abraham Accord was in the background, and the BRI was also in the background, although these two are separate issues. Now, the reason why I do not speak on Abraham Accord and its relevance for IMEC, but I move to BRI, is this, Abla. The whole world, including the G7, the G20, Asia, Africa, and Europe in particular, is speaking about the need for resilient and inclusive global value chains, which are also transparent, secure, and diversified. These are the 5-6 principles around which GVC infrastructure is being spoken about, is an objective in itself. Now, having these 5 principles in place, even if IMEC is able to achieve 2 or 3 of it, of which resilience is very important, because the current situation in Suez does bring the resilience issue into perspective. Having said this, my humble submission to today's panel is that much of the narrative in today's panel and the panels preceding this will be subject to the levels of investments that come into this project, and that also gets reflected on the inclusion of Egypt, North Africa in IMEC. What is the level of investments that these countries within IMEC, the original signatories, and the aspirants, Egypt, Morocco, Turkey, what conditions are we creating to put in investments into linking up with the production networks in the region? There is also another message in this, is that one of the reasons why BRI came into severe scrutiny earlier was the some lack of transparency in that program. Now, IMEC was basically also put in place to, bring in transparencies into the investments. Now, when these principles, these issues are all brought together, the need for investments, the need for manufacturing network connectivities, the need for transparencies and resilience, then the cause for bringing in new members into IMEC becomes, in a manner of speaking, self-evident. The real challenge then is that where this conversation, who will lead this conversation? And here I think the bilateral relations between individual countries, Europe's relations with North Africa, India's relations with Egypt. I was particularly very hopeful in the recent meetings that took place in Egypt, that the level of interest that India is taking in Saudi Arabia, can Egypt and India persuade themselves to, bring the same element of closeness in their economic conversations. So these kind of bilateral initiatives are needed to put more members, desirable members, required members, whichever way you want to discuss it. And Egypt, I think Egypt and India, Egypt and UAE, these countries, they can work together in creating the conditions. In my honest opinion, the conditions already exist. It is just putting the dots together that is important here. And some amount of bilateral work is required here. And thank you, Abla.
Thank you, Anita. Amber, what Anita just mentioned, the bilateral relations can be the ones pushing the agreement into being signed. Do you see that?
Of course, and Gérard Mestrallet has been the first special envoy nominated in November 2023, and he has made 1 year on bilateral engagement. And you see also trilateral engagement. Team Europe is working and coordinating the effort. You see already proof of concept between India and the Emirates through the virtual trade corridor. So you might have different layers and active players to push forward IMEC. This is still the pre-project phase. And I think what has been shared among the Sherpas was that we need to consolidate this phase. And just to build upon the financing need, we also need an accurate financing infrastructure gap analysis. The first figures circulating after the signature of the MOU were mentioning a financing gap about $500 billion. And the recent release of the Atlantic Council a few months ago is now stating about an estimate of $5 billion, which makes sense because IMEC is part of existing infrastructure. Investment that are already underway is financed by national infrastructure development. In India, for instance, Mundra Port is financed at the national levels. This is the case also in the Emirates. And the concentration of the missing links are actually in the Middle East, so in Israel, Jordan, and the railway connection in Saudi Arabia. So we also need to have this project-driven approach and to involve the private sectors. We didn't mention it before, but this will be a key success factor because they will be acting as developers but also financiers.
Thank you very much. Romana, do you see the private sector as a big player here in directing IMEC into the networking and the platform, or simply it's going to be private sector investing in railways in Emirates, in railways in Saudi, and then the big idea of politically maneuvering the connection actually will continue?
Sure, and I think it's really important before I answer to that question to keep in mind we are not talking about transport route here or transport routes or even network of transport routes. We are talking about coherence of certain economic space. Of course, the scale that will be needed for the buildup of this economic space cannot happen without private sector. So the whole thing has to be bankable, if you wish, for them to invest. But it requires few other things that are not in great supply at the moment. The first one is stability, political stability, security stability, so peace. The second one is some sort of commonly agreed standards that everyone adheres to. Predictability. You as a private investor, you are not going into a situation where you have no idea what's going to happen with your investment. And then, of course, all of this will require further buildup of trust that whatever new value chains are built are not going to be weaponized. And there will be quite a lot of work to be done. I hope on the European side that these FTAs will clear a lot of, or do a lot of work for us on their own. But in that sense, I am, again, at the end, going back to the map, and I'm connecting it with what Ambassador Talos said. It really is about our mental maps, and I think it's high time to start building this Indo-Med map. It's super important. And on that map, there is a tiny little sea called Adriatic Sea. Once you are in any of the 10 ports in the Adriatic, basically, you are 3 to 4 hours away from the industrial heartland of Europe. And you are in the proximity, I'm talking about sort of the arc on the east and southeast. You're in the proximity of the fastest growing market in Europe, economies in Europe with 120 million people. Add Ukraine to that, and this is where a lot of investment in Europe is going to happen. So this is why I think we need to think in really systemic way, in the value chains type of way, and what is needed for them to really materialize.
Thank you. Well, Francesco, what do you think of what Romana just explained? She's being very clear on the Indo-Med connectivity map and on the linkages here and there. Do you see potential for this happening, and who can push this? Because there is always, we always have very, very noble objectives on everything. But the question is how to go about the implementation, who to take the torch and push things forward.
Well, things are already happening now in these days. Actually, they started to happen already almost 1 year ago. And they are happening between Damietta and Trieste. They're happening in the Adriatic. So, and who is pushing this? The market, the interests of the private sectors. Then we can enjoy creating diplomatic architectures, etc., etc. They are interesting and also important frameworks. But without the interests of the private sector, you do anything. So, and what is happening now? For instance, we have a regular line between Damietta and Trieste for Ro-Ro connection, roll-on, roll-off. And Italy is the top destination of Egypt exports all over the world. So it means a lot for both countries. And it's not only important for Italy, because when you are in Trieste, like Romana was saying, it means that you are in the closest harbor to the Baltic Sea, in the closest harbor to the Central Eastern Europe. So we have to look also in this continental situation of Europe, with Central Eastern Europe, which is growing more than our Western countries, and Ukraine to rebuild. So the connection with the Black Sea, the Three Seas initiative, which was mentioned now by Romana, the Central European initiative, but this is not all, of course. I mean, it's really important, like you say, to start to include the bilateral aspects in this framework, but also now to consider the framework, I mean, the method. And here, I think, first of all, we should not care too much about the color of the cat. The important is the result. So we can have BRI, we can have IMEC, we can have several initiatives. The character of IMEC is to be something agreed among a small group of countries, which can be more, and we are certainly inclusive, but somehow what is important is a group of equal countries. There is not a leader, it's not the initiative of country X or organization Y. And I think this is important, and this couples with the Mattei plan, because you were mentioning the rebuilding of Europe after World War II, our industry, etc., starting with home, with the industry at home, but not only home. Let's think about energy. In the 50s, Mattei had an assignment to close Egypt and Eni. The government wanted to finish Eni. He rebelled. This is the power of rebellion, of not obeying to the orders. He said, no, there is a great future for energy. Changing the rules, changing the method. No more the predatory way the big oil and gas companies were using with the producing countries. And they did it in Africa, in Algeria, in Iran, in several countries. It was revolutionary, and it was a new way to work. This is the new way of the Mattei plan, not predatory and not patronizing. This is another important aspect. Avoid the paternalistic, the predicatory approach with other countries. Then we can work in a different manner. And this is the way we can have and nurture our common interests, because of course we do not do charity. we work for our own interest. And there are a lot of common interests. It's the win-win solution which was mentioned earlier. I think we can do a lot. But we also have a common enemy, which has not been mentioned: climate change. Climate change is an enemy for our interest in the Indian Ocean and in the Mediterranean. For the Pacific, it's a little bit different, because the opening of new routes going northeast means a great threat for the Mediterranean and for the Indian Ocean. It means that from the factory of the world in the Far East, goods can go north. Of course, it will take time, and it means a route completely controlled by two countries, essentially. But it means that the interested terminal can be China, maybe Japan, Korea, Russia, and Northern Europe. No more Mediterranean, no more Indian Ocean. So we have to speed up. We have important advantages. We have very good assets and cards, but we have to work on this. And we can work with nearshoring, with the companies based in Egypt, for instance, with factories based in Egypt, with production based in countries which are closer, where one can work in a better way. Of course, thinking that Suez will remain by far the most important access in this Indo-Mediterranean route, but we also need complementary routes, because you can have a Houthi threat, you can have a ship blocking the canal, and of course there is a differentiation of goods. It depends on the added value. Some goods can travel by air, very little part, 1% or 2%. Other can travel by rail or wheel. Other ro-ro in a short distance. This is what we are doing inside the Mediterranean. There will be more and more a mix. The important is to find the good mix, and the market will decide.
Thank you very much. I think we had a great discussion, and I think the outcome of the discussion is that the concept of IMEC is evolving over time and becoming smarter. The world is becoming more intelligent. It's realizing more that they have to work together, that they have to cooperate, they have to consider economic efficiency, they have to respect the interests of the private sector. They also have to know that if they put too much investment in the infrastructure, okay, and the roads are not used, then it's going to be a dead weight loss. In economics, we call it a dead weight loss, which is an investment that has been done and nobody is using. And at the end of the day, people like Shireen and others who have ships will decide which road to follow, okay? So we'll see how things happen. So I thank all of you. Now it's time to do the vote for the question, please. Anita, we're having this cute thing about voting, young people voting and stuff. It's a bit of a game. So the question will come now. Just a second. All of you be prepared to vote. Gens and older gens. Yeah, what should the top priority be in introducing new global trade corridors? Should it be environmental sustainability and green logistics? That's choice A. Economic efficiency and faster delivery time? That's choice B. And choice C is political alliances. We wait for the 58 seconds for ending the vote to observe the difference between the young and the young at heart.
Gen Z, 25%.
So time is up, and the winner is the Gen Z's 58% see economic efficiency and faster delivery times, when others see 80% see that. Okay, on the environmental sustainability, 16% for the Gen Z's, only 10% from others, and then we have on the political alliances. This is actually quite interesting. Political alliances for the Gen Zs, they see it as something that's more likely to happen. So that this tells you how sensitive they are to political alliances, and then it's 10. So thank you very much. Thank you very much, great panelists. Let's have a picture together, and then. Nicer pictures to take. Are you still on? Okay. Big hug. I'm still waiting for a picture of the bride on my mobile phone. Okay, don't forget that. Okay, I got the invitation for the wedding on the phone, and I want the picture of the bride. Very important. Okay.
I will.
All right. Thank you so much, Anita. Have a great wedding. And I wish her a great life.
Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you. For all of you, lunch, finally, we're going to eat something, and then we have those parallel lunch sessions that are by invitation. So please, you receive an invitation to one of them. Please go. The lunch session number 1 is going to be in hall 1. There is a mark at the door. It's the one about Sudan and the Horn of Africa. The second one is on the climate finance, and the third one is on AI and the upcoming summit. So please, and then we'll see you in the morning. We did not have a chance today to give room for the audience to ask questions, but tomorrow we're going to take care of that. Today it was very tight, but tomorrow we're going to work it out. Thank you all. Thank you.